Episode 5, Caps, Boulders, Sarah Connor Shoulders. For the quick tip in this episode, and remember the quick tip is that short-term item that we can do right away. It's the actionable stuff that we're going to talk a few minutes about. Right? For the quick tip, meditation was for suckers. And then I got good at it. For the main topic, which is going to be the meat of the episode, we're going to discuss all of my favorite shoulder exercises. So how do you blow them shoulders up? Please note, I didn't say best. I didn't say the best exercises for a shoulder because that's all context dependent. But we'll get into that, right? And for the first random topic, I want to take a moment to kind of reintroduce myself. Allow me to reintroduce myself. And then the second main topic or second random topic is how, and it's kind of a thought process here, but how empathy is being used as a weapon of mass destruction. What's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing well out there. Listen, I'm Coach Evan. This is Say Cheese and Live Studio, and you're listening to the Scowl Method Podcast. All right, so there is this one point in time when I thought that meditation was for suckers. I thought meditation was such a flimsy, phony practice, and I never really tried it, didn't buy into it. I thought it was a whole bunch of foo-foo. But then I actually just set everything aside and gave it a shot. And turns out I ended up being pretty good at it and actually helped in a lot of different instances for me. So there's two kinds of meditation that I typically do. The first kind is actually just the feeling kind. And that's basically me just kind of, and I'm not saying empty my mind. I'm just not focusing on anything. I'm actually letting my mind wander. So I let my mind wander, but in efforts to feel more. So this is actually where I go over kind of a little bit of a status check. Like if my knee is hurting or something like that, like physically hurting, I'll try and like feel out like where things are a little achy or where things feel really good. But a lot of this type of meditation, I'm not really hyper focusing on anything. I'm not focusing on any particular thought. I'm not even really focusing on that body part that's, hurting or aching or whatever it may be. I'm more so like daydreaming, right? So, I kind of just lay out on the floor. I completely relax. So the whole idea for this portion of what I do here is to relieve tension. So I'm just relaxing and letting go of the tension that inevitably builds up over this life. So I use that as an opportunity, maybe like 5 to 10 minutes or something like that, just to kind of lay out there and feel and daydream and relax. Sometimes I fall asleep. Other times I'm still pretty, awake, but really, really relaxed. This is kind of comparable to if you have heard of yoga nidra, but it's not quite the same thing. A lot of times what I'll do to kind of get in that mode is I'll listen to or watch, and you're going to laugh, Bob Ross painting episodes, because that's my guy. Like Bob Ross is just, I have never seen anybody, he's just a real calm, or he was a really calm, cool dude, and just that sound of the painting knife and going against the canvas and the brush against the canvas is actually one of the reasons why I started painting back in the day in the first place. So anyway, that's a whole nother story. But that's the type of meditation that I'll start off with usually. So for the thinking kind of meditation that I do, I break it out into different sections here. So the first section typically is just meditating on God's word, right? For me, it's whatever I'm reading in my Bible study, or it's just some verse that comes up, or just meditating on some of the principles and precepts of Christianity in general, right? So I'll meditate on that for about 5 minutes or so, and then I'll go into kind of a self-reflection period where this is kind of where I do my self-analysis and emotional check, right? So in the previous, I guess 2 episodes ago, in episode 3, talking about a sound heart, I said one of the ways that you can train your emotions is through meditation. So this is the process that I'm talking about specifically, where you analyze what you're feeling, how you're feeling, why you're feeling it, and you analyze what you're thinking, how you're thinking, why you're thinking it. So it's just a period, a short period, of course, but it's a short period of self-reflection at that point. And then what I typically do then is I move on to thinking about working out. It's kind of crazy, right? So say you're like addicted to the gym without saying you're addicted to the gym, but I meditate on, let's just say it's a lagging body part, right? My biceps. And I always use my biceps as an example for some reason. Maybe because I like that part the least. But I meditate on actually doing bicep curls without actually, lifting the weights or anything like that. And there were a whole bunch of studies that I kind of pulled that from. One of them was a study done with basketball players, and they were shooting free throws. 2 groups were shooting free throws. One group actually went to practice to shoot free throws, and the other group didn't go to practice, but they envisioned shooting free throws, and both groups improved in accuracy. So that's one thing. There was also a study done with bodybuilders, well-trained lifters, and the one group did lifting as usual, and the other group just envisioned and visualized and thought about and meditated on lifting, and both groups saw gains. So I take those studies and think like, okay, you can actually change your physical body by thinking. And we knew this in a way, right? So I use that moment, 5 minutes again, to envision working out a particular lagging muscle part or something like that, where I'm like, okay, you know what? I want to grow my biceps. So I actually envision for 5 minutes doing 3 sets of 20 bicep curls. But that's part of my process. And then the next part of that process, I envision particular outcomes. Now, here's the key with this one. I envision, I just almost knocked the glasses off my face. Listen, I envision particular outcomes, understanding that I might not always achieve those outcomes. So I envision like different arenas, right? So I envision being a better father, being a better husband, a better business owner, a better athlete, a better person just in general in life, right? So I envision these particular outcomes, being in that particular state or achieving those certain things. And because I have an understanding that these outcomes are not at all guaranteed, I then go into my next section of meditation, which is basically thanking God for the blessings along the way. Because what I do understand is, even though I might not reach that particular outcome, almost every single time there's something that I gain through the process of going for that outcome. So I thank God for that process and the blessings that fall within the process, the growth that I achieve or the patience that I gain or whatever it is. I thank God for that part of the process. So that's how I usually break out my meditation, right? It sounds very strict and structured. It doesn't have to be that way for you. I would start off potentially with just maybe like a 5 minute relaxation one, and then a 5 minute focus on something one, and then see where it goes from there. I mean, that's exactly where I started, and then it grew into this 30, 45 minute process. So there's your quick tip. All right. So let's break out into the main topic here, right? Again, we talking about some shoulders. All right, so here we go. Let's talk about some well-developed, round, boulder jacked shoulders. All right, so we're going to talk about, how to, or rather, my favorite exercises for developing some nice shoulders. Now, I alluded to it before, earlier in the episode, when I said, please note I say my favorite. I don't say the best, right? I don't, it's the internet is flooded with the best of this, the best of that, for this, for that. And my idea is, and there are a lot of other people, that this is not like a brand new idea or anything like that, and I'm not trying to pose it as such. But the main idea here is, I'm just going to tell you my favorites. I'm going to tell you my favorites, and I'm going to tell you why they're my favorites, my favorite exercises to do, and my favorite exercises to coach, right? Because to come up with something to say that it's the best, I mean, the best is context dependent. In other words, I'm not going to give you the best exercises to develop your shoulders, because the thing is, I don't know you. I don't know how you move. I don't know if you had any injuries previous to anything. I don't know exactly what you're able to do, what you're not able to do. I don't know if you have shoulders at all. You might not even have shoulders, right? So these are the things I don't know. I don't have context, so I can't tell you the best shoulder exercises. I can tell you my favorites, though, and that's what I plan to do, right? So the second part here is, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. I have a particular rating system for every exercise, okay? So I rate each exercise based on four metrics, right? The opportunity for strength, the opportunity for hypertrophy, the recovery process, and the difficulty of doing the exercise. And it's a 1 to 10 scale for each section, okay? So a 10 on the strength scale would mean it is great for strength gains, right? A 10 on the hypertrophy scale means you're going to add some lean muscle tissue, right? A 10 on the recovery scale means it's the easiest to recover from. And a 10 on a difficulty scale basically says this is not that difficult to do. So it's not like an Olympic lift, right? which tends to lean towards being more difficult, right? So how do your shoulders how are they formed? What are they? What are your delts, your deltoids? What are they, right? And what do they do, and how are they made up? So your shoulder, your deltoids, is made up of 3 sections. Well, really, it's 7 sections, but the main 3 sections that everybody talks about, that we know the most, that's most common knowledge, right, is you have your front delt, your mid delt, and your rear delt. But in actuality, they break out into 7 smaller sections, where your mid delt is actually one small sliver of muscle. And then you have 3 individual sections connecting at the clavicle on the front for your front delt. And then you have 3 more sections on the back connecting at the acromion, right? So, and they all kind of bring down into the humerus and, well, to your arm bone, right? I don't know how to put that in layman's terms, but they all connect, and they basically move together to move your arm kind of away from your body. That's what they're responsible for, moving your arm away from your body in a number of different degrees, going around your body all the way to the back here, right? So that's the anatomy of it. That's kind of a brief, very, very brief anatomy, and a very brief physiology in the way it moves, right? So now you understand, right? Again, these are my favorite exercises. I have a particular rating system, and you know how the shoulder moves a little bit. So now, what are these exercises? So the first exercise, that's ultimately my favorite, and it's probably a no-brainer for a lot of people, is lateral raises. The lateral raise in 3 variations in particular, but I kind of just group them up into the lateral raise exercise, right? So overall, I give the lateral raise a 5, kind of like mid-range on the strength scale, and 8 on the hypertrophy scale, because it's really good to kind of add them up. The reason why I gave it a 5 on the strength scale, though, is because it's really hard to get that muscle so much stronger because it works with the other ones. So it's like you're going to be doing a lot of compound lifts in order for, to get strengthened. And a lot of times those compound muscles end up taking over anyway for your shoulders. So it's kind of hard to strengthen up your shoulders in a traditional sense. I mean, you could do it for sure and make sure you have strong shoulders and strong rotator cuffs and all that fun stuff. But I don't match it up with the traditional ways of like strength training, basically. So I just gave it a 5. I gave it middle of the road, and lateral raises, middle of the road for strength, but great for hypertrophy, right? And that's why I gave it an 8. Recovery, depending on which version you do, I gave that another middle of the road 5. And in terms of difficulty to do, that's another middle of the road 5. So basically 5, 8, 5, 5. Right? And now, why do I say it's a 5 in the difficulty scale? Well, it's not like just based on the variations. It's not super difficult to do, even though a lot of people jack it up. And you want to keep in mind when you're doing lateral raises, it's almost like you want to make sure that you're not hiking your shoulders up, but you're kind of depressing down. So you're almost activating your lats a little bit to keep your shoulders pressed down. And then from that point, you're just pushing out, pushing your arms out. So it's as if you're standing in like a doorway or something like that, and you're trying to reach the sides of the doorway by pushing out and without leaning one way or the other, right? A lot of problems that people tend to run into is they're trying to do full range lateral raises with too much weight. And they end up doing some weird bicep exercise, some weird back exercise, and it typically doesn't work out. But there is a place for heavy lateral partials. So part of the responsibility of your shoulder in general is to stabilize that joint, mind you. So the more pressure you can put on your shoulder in terms of stabilization, the stronger it tends to get. So heavy lateral partials tend to work out pretty well in terms of keeping your, in terms of like strength, in terms of hypertrophy. It seems to work out pretty well there. So that's a variation that you could do. And please keep in mind, I'm going to have videos for all of these exercises that I'm mentioning and exactly how to do them. And it's like kind of like little tutorials, okay? So, just hang with me a little bit as I explain each of these exercises. All right, so my next favorite exercise to do for shoulders, for well-developed shoulders, is an exercise called monkey rows. And it's a weird exercise, but basically it's like an upright row, but you're not overhand. You have a neutral grip and your hands are at your sides. You could basically do these with dumbbells, or you can do them with a trap bar, right? So basically your arms are going to be at your sides and you're going to stand upright and then you're going to pull and basically row upright. So it's not a great range of motion, but you're able to add a little bit of weight here and basically tag the middle delt. It actually tags the whole shoulder, depending on your elbow angle, but you want to make sure that your elbows are kind of out at the side. So it's like this, right? And the dumbbells or the trap bar basically just going up and down your sides like this, right? Now, inevitably for this one, as you go up a little bit more in the weight, you're going to bring in other muscles, primarily your traps, but it's still one of my favorites. I actually do it on a day where I'm trying to develop my traps and work my traps as well. I just really like them, and they feel pretty decent. And I wouldn't worry too much about being able to have your like elbows all the way out here. That's kind of a weird feeling. Like even if they're slightly turned back a little bit, the whole point though is make sure you have proud chest. So you're upright and your hands are staying at your sides, and you're just up here, up here, up here. Okay. That exercise is typically it's pretty good. So I guess the ratings that I gave it was 5, 7, 4, 3, and I had to just double check that one because so it was 5, middle of the road in terms of strength, but I think I kind of want to change that. I think that's probably more like a 6 or a 7 on the strength gains because it's kind of a compound exercise, especially if you start to bring in your traps a little bit more. So I think I'm changing that to a 6, right? So instead it'll be 6, 7 on a hypertrophy scale because it's more of a compound exercise. You're bringing more muscles in, tends to lead to more muscle growth. And then a 4 for the recovery scale. Again, the closer you get to a compound exercise, the longer it's going to take you to recover. So the lower on a recovery scale it's going to be. So here it's more like a 4. And then 3 for difficulty, because it's a lot of people, first of all, can't do upright rows, and a lot of people shouldn't do upright rows. So it's a little bit more of a difficult exercise. Plus, not that many people know about it. But it's actually, I think it's an old school exercise. But it's one of those things where, like, if you over torque your elbows and you bring them forward like this, then you have a problem. Or if you just don't bring them forward enough and you're hanging back here, you're turning it into some other exercise that actually is on the list too. But you want to make sure, like, the difficulty comes in at make sure that your elbows are at the right angle there. But so that's that becomes a 3 on the difficulty scale, okay? And the next exercise is amongst my favorite exercises, period. Like, of all exercises. I wish I could do these things almost every day. And it's a variation of, like, kind of like a monkey row, but it's not. So basically what it does is it works your rear delt. And I really just call these, like, trap bar bent over rows, but just focused on the shoulder. So when you typically do a row or a bent over row, like, you're actually hinging and going deep into it. Here, you're just going to slightly lean in a little bit, and you're going to grab the trap bar, neutral grip, and what you're going to do is that you're actually going to pull your elbows back and up. And by doing that, you're working the rear delt like this here, and I don't know if you can see it on the boom right here. So you're working your rear delt. So typically you work your rear delt 2 ways. This way, going along this plane, or this way. And a lot of people find that they can work their rear delt better this way than going this way. So for the trap bar rows that are a little bit more upright, you're going to have neutral grip, slight lean in, and you're basically going to angle it so that, or angle yourself so that your rear delt is doing the lifting. And that is one of the few exercises I think I felt my rear delts on, because most exercises I don't feel my rear delts. And so practicing that exercise again and again really helped me feel my rear delts even when I'm doing flies now. So it's a good one. At the scale, the rating I have for that one is it's 6, 9, 4, 8. So 6 on the strength scale, because again, it's kind of a compound lift and you're bringing in some of your traps, but now middle trap, right? A 9 on the hypertrophy scale, because this exercise is literally what I use to blow up my rear delts. So it's my favorite. But it's a really good one, again, because it's a compound lift type thing, or it could be a compound lift. You can add a little bit more weight and really just drive in that motion here. Boom, you're here. And then it ends up being a 4 on a recovery scale. Again, compound lifts tend to take longer to recover from. Man, that's really it, right? And then an 8 on the difficulty scale. It's not that hard to do. In fact, there's more when people are trying to, and this is what I noticed, when people are trying to do bent over rows, they end up actually doing this type of shoulder row because they're not bent over enough and they're not in it enough, and or their back ends up rolling too much, so they have to kind of stand up a little bit taller, right? So they don't necessarily have the glute strength and the lower back strength to be able to keep that position. So I found that a lot of people end up just doing rear delt rows. But it's one of my favorite exercises. Now, the next exercise, my next favorite exercise, actually works the front delt, right? The front delt. Front delt. You have multiple front delts. No, the front delt. And it's a lying down on a bench, cable front raise, right? So you're basically going to lie down on the bench. You want to set the cable up at like maybe medium height. So if you're standing up and you're at the cable stack, you want to set it up to basically belly button height, right? Then you want to grab a bench, move it up there, lay the bench completely flat, and you want to lie on the bench with the cable stack, right? And so now you want to grab a bar handle, basically, so that your hands could be like this, your overhand, and you want to lie down and you want to do a front raise. So it's going to basically, let me move this out of the way real quick, right? So then you want to do a front raise. So you're here while lying down, and you're going to bring it up, and then back down. One of my favorite exercises. It really tags the front delt, and it also tags a little bit of your traps too. But it eliminates this body English we tend to put on for a front raise, right? So if we were doing traditional front raises with dumbbells, we would kind of tend to swing into it a little bit, right? With the bench, lying down on a bench on the bar and the cable there, that pretty much eliminates that, and it forces you to really tag your front delt even more. Now, the rating I gave this one was 5.768. So it's 5 on the strength scale, and it might even be a little bit less than that. It's probably more like a 4, because you can't necessarily stack up the weight on this one, right? So, so the 7 on the hypertrophy scale, because you are directly targeting this muscle. So you'll target this somewhere around the upper pec, and then somewhere around the trap as well. So it targets that area really, really well. Okay. A 6 on the recovery scale. For some reason, and maybe this is just me, but myself and a couple other people that I've coached doing this, they've become really, really sore doing this exercise in particular. So the recovery isn't as good as you would think. But it wasn't like debilitating soreness. It's just, wow, I didn't think so. Maybe it'll take a few more times of doing it, but I noticed that this one tends to make people a little bit more sore than just the regular exercise, right? Just regular front raises. And then finally, it's an 8 on the difficulty scale. It ain't that hard to do. In fact, you can actually lock yourself in place, keeping your feet on the ground and actually tightening up your glutes while laying there, so that you're not going all over the place. It's particularly a very easy exercise to pull off here. Okay. Now the next exercise is a really, really good one. We're working on these rear delts again, and it's a suspension T raise. Okay. So if you have a suspension trainer hooked up anywhere, basically what you want to do is you want to kind of hang from it, and move this away so hopefully you can still hear me, but hang from it, right? And then you're just going to bring your arms out. So you're basically doing a fly with the suspension trainer, okay? Now, that one you will feel your rear delts on very, very easily, and you can adjust the pressure that you're putting on your rear delts by the angle that you're standing initially, right at the beginning of the exercise. And this one I have rating of 4, 5, 8, 10. Okay, so 4 on the strength scale because you're not really loading up the weight for this one, right? And that's probably more like a 3. It seems like I'm adjusting all my ratings on a fly, but 4 on the strength scale is not really known for strength. A 5. And that probably should be more like a 6 on the hypertrophy scale, because you could really, like, if you could get, let's just say you do 4 sets of 20 of those things, oh man, you're going to get a nasty pump. So I think it might be a little bit worse on the strength scale, a little bit better on the hypertrophy scale. An 8 on the difficulty scale, recovery scale. 8 on the recovery scale because it isn't going to be too much for you to recover from. I don't think I've ever gotten sore from these things. I don't think anybody's gotten sore from these things. And you don't really feel, extreme fatigue doing suspension T raises, right? Now it's a 10 on the difficulty scale because it's easy to do. You sit there, you hang there, and then you open up. The only thing that you have to worry about, the only thing really, is to make sure that you're not doing like your elbow angle isn't too low. So for example, if you're watching on the video, my elbows are basically at 45-degree angles here, right? You don't want to do a raise from there. You want to actually raise them up so that you're actually forming a T, right? And then bring out from there. The only other thing that people tend to do is they tend to bend their arms as they're doing it. So it's just like you're also doing some weird form of tricep exercises in the middle of it. But other than that, it's not a very hard exercise to do at all. All right, so the last exercise on my favorites list, at least for right now, my favorite list or my favorite exercises to blow up your shoulders list. Yeah, try saying that 5 times fast. But my last favorite exercise is something I called, and I'm not even sure what people have named this before, but I named them Cerberus raises. Okay, and then I was like, well, what are those? So basically, it's a landmine exercise that I've done for a long time, right? And you basically want to set up the landmine. If you don't know what a landmine is, basically it's a little apparatus that you put in between inside the two, like a couple plates, and you have the plates in the middle of a floor, so it looks like a landmine. And then you stick the barbell into the little apparatus so that the barbell can move all around the plates, and you can like lift it, raise it, and you can do a whole bunch of different exercises with it, right? So what I typically like to do with the landmine are these Cerberus raises, and it's like a lateral raise, but it's also like a front raise, and it's also like an exercise that I've seen before called sword pulls, where you're basically pulling and raising the arm up and around like this, but you're starting on this angle right here, so your arm is here, and you're pulling up like that, right? So it's very similar to like sword pulls, but here you're taking the end of the barbell, and it's going to kind of go across, like you're kind of almost hitting close to your midsection here, right? But your arm is going to be here. You're going to be at your opposite. So you're going to take, let's just say I'm taking my right arm. I'm going to have my hand at my left pocket, right? So it's going to be across my body a little bit. And I'm going to, while holding onto this barbell, raise all the way up at an angle. So I'm going up and across at an angle. Those things are so good, but there's a little catch to them, right? So here's the rating. The rating I have for those 5.5, 7.2, okay? So 5 on the strength scale, because you're not going to load up the weight for this, because it actually puts your shoulder in a kind of a weird spot. So you have to have some pretty tough shoulders already, right? So I definitely don't put this in for every coaching program. Not at all, right? So it's a 5 on the strength scale, a 5 on a hypertrophy scale, but a 7 on a recovery scale, because you're basically using all of your shoulder at different points, and you're kind of stretching or going to the limits of your shoulder mobility here, right? And it is a 2 on the difficulty scale. It's a pretty difficult exercise to do. Now, of that rating, why is this one of my favorites? Because, well, you know, it really comes down to kind of like, it's one of those challenging exercises, right? And I actually had to build my shoulders up enough in terms of mobility and in terms of strength to be able to attempt these safely, right? So it almost is like a mental challenge for me to do Cerberus raises. I like them though, now that I'm able to do them. There was only a few people that I've coached that have been actually able to do them, because, you know, everybody's shoulders made differently, right? So some people, they have their range of motion kind of ends at a certain point over here, and then it just doesn't really kind of work out right when they're trying to lift it. It's semi above their head and all that fun stuff. So it doesn't always work out. But I love the exercise because I always get a great pump out of them, right? But you can't load up the weight, and it is very, very difficult to do because you're working with the size of, or the weight of the barbell. Now, if you're working with Olympic barbells and it's 45 pounds, that's a lot of weight to lift for something that's going across your body, and you're just using your shoulders to bring it back around. So it doesn't score very highly on the difficulty rating there. But it's still a pretty decent exercise to work to build up to, at least, right? Hi, I'm Coach Evan, head coach and owner of Say Cheese and Lift Studio, creator and owner of the Say Cheese and Lift brand, but I'm also a husband, a father, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a thinker, I'm a creative, I'm a Christian, I'm a truth seeker. I'm all of those things. The Say Cheese and Lift brand and Say Cheese and Lift in general is more than just a gym. It's multifaceted. I am more than just a coach or more than a professional in the health and wellness area, industry, whatever you want to call it. I am also multifaceted. And because of that, the Scowl Method podcast is going to be multifaceted. So it's not simply going to be a health and wellness podcast, even though that's what we are in a general sense. But we're also a commentary podcast. So this random section here is what I use to dig for, to talk about, to discuss, to analyze the truth in many other arenas outside of health and wellness and fitness. And a lot of these random topics, they stem from conversations I've had with my clients. And I mean, think about it, right? Like, do you suppose that the only thing I do during our sessions is just sit there and count reps? No, that's not it. Right? Plus, most of my clients think I can't count anyway. So it doesn't work out that way. It doesn't work out too well. But we have discussions. We talk about a lot of different things. Things that most people wouldn't be able to talk about with anyone else for one reason or another. I mean, we talk about life, marriage, kids, faith, God, love, conspiracy theories, the economy, feelings, manhood, womanhood, technology, entrepreneurship. We talk about all of these things. Race, religion, politics. We talk about all of that stuff. Nothing's off limits. And nothing is really off limits because I'm seeking the truth in all of these things. And you know, that's kind of part of how I train, and that's part of how I coach. But even more is just, that's actually caring about the person. I find it interesting that a lot of people cannot have these conversations with other people because it just gets too heated. And you know, granted, we're in a point in time where the temperature is running pretty hot right now, right? Everybody seems to be at everybody's neck. They're just coming at each other's throats all the time. So I get it. But I don't think the solution is going back to a point in time where we were just nice, right? That period of niceness, I think, did more harm than good. And we would only be nice and cover up what we truly felt and what we truly thought. And we did that for the sake of decorum. It was just the nice thing to do. But we weren't learning anything. And we for sure weren't moving forward. Now, the pendulum has kind of swung the other way in an extreme. Because now it's almost like we're saying too much. In a sense that, not even too much, but it's like a lot of people are more so just speaking their feelings to situations instead of speaking truth. They'll be quick to apply anger, sadness, their rage, whatever it may be, to a particular situation before they apply logic. So we're in some strange times right now. But those are the types of things that we talk about. Those are the types of things that we discuss. Those are the type of things that I hope to bring to the podcast and open up for discussion for you all as well. And you might not always agree with the things I say. That's fine. You might not always agree with my viewpoint. That's okay as well. Still love you. Still hope for the best for you. But that ultimately is the game plan here for this random section, for this podcast. It's just to continue to pour as much truth into the world, into you all, as much as possible. Right? And I know for a fact I'm going to learn a lot along the way myself. I invite that. I look forward to that. So again, I'm Coach Evan. Right? This is Say Cheese and Lift. This is Say Cheese Lift Studio. This is the Scout Method Podcast. And we're going to get into a lot of things. All right. So what I propose here, it sounds a little strong, but empathy has been weaponized and has been turned into a weapon of mass destruction. So first, we have to talk about what is empathy, right? And I'm going to just go through a combination of definitions here, basically. But the general consensus is empathy is the ability to sense other people's emotions, coupled with the ability to imagine what someone else might be thinking or feeling. Now, there's some gaps in that one, right? Now, let's start with, first of all, the ability to empathize with someone, right? So go back to episode 3. I talk about a sound heart. And I talk about a sound heart, and there was this portion of that episode that essentially discusses the idea of emotional intelligence. And the thing is, empathy requires emotional intelligence. So if you're lower on the emotional intelligence scale, meaning you can't name or identify the feelings that you are feeling, then you're going to find it very hard to empathize with somebody else who's feeling a range of emotions as well, right? And or your compass for what they would potentially feel in that situation is going to be slightly off. For instance, if you can only feel, and this is a very base example, but if you can only feel happiness and sadness and you can't name or label any other emotion, you couldn't necessarily empathize with the person who is angry. You couldn't put yourself in that person's shoes and think what they would think and experience what they would experience in that case, because you don't know how to identify anger. So there's the first gap right there. But that's just in general. So let's just say everybody is very empathetic and they know, and we have this understanding basically, right? And let me pull back just a little bit, so that I can explain where did this come from, right? And I'm not going to go into extreme detail at this part, but it's like this came from a conversation I was having with one of my clients. And I just simply asked the question, he was going through the situation with me and everything like that, and we were talking about it. And I just asked, why is it that we are, in general, in America at least, called on as a society to have empathy for marginalized groups? Yet that same empathy would not be given to the Christian. As a subset to that, furthermore, why is it looked at, why are Christians looked at as typically non-empathetic, right? It seems like a lot of people believe that Christians don't have empathy, even though Christians are called on to have empathy. Go to Romans 12:15, right? I can even hold. So Romans 12:15 basically says, "Rejoice with them that do rejoice, and weep with them that weep. Why would you do that? Essentially is telling you to be empathetic. So I might be missing something in a sense that why would Christians typically be seen as non-empathetic? But even furthermore, why does it seem like we should have empathy for everybody else but the Christian? So it's like it's almost like we're on a one-way street here, and it's not, and it just is, it's not equal or balanced. So where do I say that is being used as a weapon of mass destruction? Right, that's a little strong, but we've been kind of trained to think a particular way. You know, it was like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna put myself in the shoes of this person whose life I've never experienced, and then try and imagine how they would feel about it. Sounds kind of like a setup to me. And I'm not saying empathy is bad. Obviously, we're supposed to, as a Christian, you're supposed to have empathy, right? So, but where does it go wrong? Right? And so in a general sense, empathy, so for the person who's having empathy for the other, they can easily use that to manipulate others, right? And that's where empathy goes wrong. It's in manipulation, right? The person who's empathetic or the empath, they can use the empathy to manipulate others in a way that is just like, hey, look, I feel for this group, and I'm gonna be one for the cause for this group. I'm gonna line myself up with this group because I feel so badly for them or whatever, and I'm gonna act like I'm helping them out when I'm really taking advantage of them. I'm not going to dig any more into that. But then there's the other side of empathy where the non-empath uses empathy to gain an advantage over empaths. Whereas it's like, hey, listen, don't you see? I'm in a poor, lowly state. Don't you feel that? Don't you feel for me? Now help me. Oh, it'd be great if you could help me out with this because I was just... Basically, they use other people's empathy for self-gain, right? So it's just like, it's a pity me thing, right? Pity me, woe is me, now help me. And people fall for that all the time, right? It's just like, you know, there have been scams based on that alone to take advantage of your empathy for decades. Probably even more than that. Hundreds of years, I'm sure. Right? That's one way where the it's used for self-gain for the non-empath. And I think I'm going to leave that one there too. Because both of those versions of empathy are corrupt and not at all what it's supposed to be. See, in a lot of cases, that empathy is separate from compassion. Empathy without compassion is corrupted empathy. The next way that empathy, and this is from a Christian perspective, the next way that empathy is used in a corrupt manner is if it's purely an emotional response without being actually coupled with truth. So you feel everything that person is going through, but it's actually enabling a particular sin, or it's enabling a typical type of corruption. And that's where empathy's often been weaponized, where it's just like you feel for this particular person or this particular group, and that feeling and that empathy that you have for that person kind of causes you to overlook all of the bad stuff because they're in such a bad position, a low position, and you feel for them. They can basically do no wrong. And that's where it's also been corrupt. I'm not naming any names or anything like that, but just look around. You see it everywhere you go. And then another way, or the last way I have, at least for you on this one, that empathy has become corrupted is when you have the emotional response and it's not coupled with rationality. Okay, so the example I just gave you before was where you have the emotional response and it's not coupled with truth, right? So then, therefore, it enables sin. This one is, it's not coupled, empathy, you have the emotional response and it's not coupled with rationality, and therefore it causes terrible decision making. And it's a short term, the idea is more like a short term fix in favoring the short term over longevity. It's like taking medicine, and you don't want your like, I have two boys, again, you don't, like, one of my boys gets sick and they have to get a shot or something like that. That shot is painful. Me feeling for them would basically say, like, nah, man, that's gonna hurt them, so no, don't do it. That's me having empathy for them, but is also kind of corrupted in a sense that he needs that medicine to get better, but he's not gonna do it because, right? So you're favoring the short term over the long term, and you have to consider these things when you're looking. So when somebody tells you you should have empathy or you should be more empathetic, well, you know, these are the ways and these are the things that you maybe would consider, just so that you're actually properly empathetic and not being taken advantage of. And I guess the last way, or another way, or last way, there's plenty of ways, but this one kind of just pops into my head a little bit, where you basically make empathy your idol. So you become, like in this instance, you become so conditioned with feeling what other people feel, or feeling what you think other people feel, that you've built up this separate world around yourself, and you treat that as your God. So then that overtakes, and again, it's an emotional response, and that overtakes the truth of God. And you see a lot of Christians do the same thing. I could name very, very specific groups. I think I don't want to go down that road quite yet. So all I'm saying for this segment is just keep your eyes open. Keep your eyes open, head on a swivel, and understand and recognize when potentially you're being taken advantage of because of your empathy. Well, there you have it, folks. That's episode 5 of the Scout Method podcast. I'm going to make this one quick, snappy. Look, I need y'all to do all the social media things, but really help me out on the podcast. Download, subscribe. You'll get the notification, let you know when the next one is out. It's every other week, right? Download or rather subscribe to the YouTube channel. Comment, like that stuff. Again, I say subscribe again and share everything. Be the most sharing. Sharing is caring. Be the most sharing person on the face of this planet, and send some of this stuff. Send some of these clips out to other people you know. I'm trying my hardest to grow this thing, and I'm also trying my hardest to provide value to all of you. And even if it's just a perspective shift, a way of thinking, whatever it may be, but help me out. Help me help you put this stuff out there, and we'll all just keep trucking together. All right. So in the meantime, I'm Coach Evan. This is Say Cheese and Lift Studio, and you just got finished listening to the Scout Method podcast. I'm gonna see y'all on the next one. Y'all take care.